By all means, Hahem. This idea that all of these should be blended together into like one little thing that you don't stop playing between the turn of pages. It was a nice idea,
May the Lord protect and defend you. May He always shield you from shame. May you come to be in paradise a shining name. May you be my ruler, may you
and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shalom. Hi, everybody. Yeah. I have to look all the way across. Boy, it's gonna make me dizzy. It'll be great. The lovely person in my family said tonight is show up for Shabbat. Did you know about that? Hashtag show up for Shabbat. Really, you saw it too. Okay, so she was making it out. Good. Okay. So, all right, good. You win because you showed up, and we're happy to see you all. We have many pieces of paper. What does it mean when we have many, many colored pieces of paper?
Lots of things to
Dan
do.
has been making the Xerox machine work extra hard. And trees have been wasted if you don't look at these things. All right, so let me pick the first one. All right, starting for a long time from now, on the coral color sheet, weekend retreat. It's going to be Martin Luther King's birthday, and we do stay. We come in on Saturday. We come in on Saturday morning. We'll have Friday night worship services, no problem. Saturday we bop up. It's a little bit north of Tampa. It doesn't take that long to get there, and we stay there for a couple nights, and we leave on Monday. Awesome. People who want to camp can actually camp. People who want a motel room can camp that way too. Anyway, look into that. It's something we did for many, many years, and then we sort of didn't do it because it was complicated. And now it's back on the schedule, so if you want to support this, then we'll know that you like it. All right, where am I? Blue. All right. The Rosh Chodesh dinner, if you haven't signed up, it's next weekend. Oh my gosh. There we go. Next weekend is Rosh Chodesh dinner, Friday night. It's 6 o'clock, yeah. Be here at 6 because we have to fit in the dinner plus the clean up and then come over here for services. So make sure to be there basically on time, or we're not gonna save you anything. If you come late, bring something for yourself. And a very, very lovely person is cooking it for us. Yes. You'll ask me later. All right. And $8 per person, 18 in the family. Is there a sign-up sheet in the foyer?
Yes.
I see nods. Yes. Okay. Good. Excellent. Good plan. Now, this is a new thing down at the bottom of this blue sheet. Family meeting. We're having a meeting. We're going to talk about boring things that we never talk about during services, like finances. We'll take your recommendations. We have surprises. We'll have surprises for you. But note the time and the date, November 25th, 7 to 8 on a Sunday evening. And if you're at all interested in the financial goings on, this might be a good time to come. There's no charge. That was a joke. Oh, it's gonna be that kind of night, huh? Huh? Coffee will be ready for free.
You found it.
I know how we could make an awful lot of money. Anyway, back to, and get ready for the next Havdalah and game night. It was really wonderful to be able to have game night because that was the evening of the unfortunate occurrence in Pittsburgh, and we were able to not only do Havdalah, but we also said Kaddish, and that was a wonderful moment that we were able to do because we were just going to be together anyway. Anyway, that's the kind of things that happen on game night. All right, all these ups and downs here, you can see this, and then finally, last but not least, we normally have a picnic in the fall or in the early spring. We do not have picnics anymore that are like in August. Or, see, Jenny's going, no. Or September, no. People in Florida, that's not when we want to have a picnic. When do we want to have a picnic? December. Yes. So that's always a good time. Philippi Park is just up Bayshore Drive here, and you go through the light in downtown Safety Harbor and keep going, and it's up there on the right, not too many miles, maybe 3 miles. And it's going to be there. Any questions? I don't know, talk to somebody who's around. We'll give you what we can. Well, I've used up all my time. giving all the announcements. So. Oh, and don't forget, tonight is Happy Time Change. Or this weekend, Happy Time Change. Right? Happy Time Change. What's Happy Time Change? We gain an hour of sleep.
Yeah.
What's Sad Time Change? Sad is
Lose an hour.
lose an hour of sleep. Or as somebody I knew liked to say, fall back. Fall, your clock goes back. Spring forward, fall back. Happy. Because, as it says in the, okay, good onomatopoeia. You know, whether we want to or not, or whether we can control it or not, Shabbat has arrived right on time. In fact, a little early today. Next week it will be not as early. It's a privilege to be able to worship together. Worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who continually guards his people, continually shows us love. He continually shows us grace. And we are very thankful that he is with us no matter where we are. Thanks for coming. Shabbat shalom.
One other thing, if you've not already picked up your family directory, please see Matt and he will get you a copy. As Patrice has pointed out, this is show up for Shabbat weekend, or Shabbat, however you want to put it. And it was put together as a way of showing solidarity with the Pittsburgh Jewish community and with the larger Jewish community as a whole. So we're grateful that you have joined us, that you have in fact shown up for Shabbat. And even in times like this, or perhaps especially in times like this, it's important for us to remember the promise of God that's inherent within Magen Avot. He remains a shield to us as he was to our ancestors. Pages 10 to 13 is that response as Richard leads, and then we in fact do respond.
Magen Avot idbaru, Chayei metim b'ma'amaru, Ha'el hakadosh she'en kamohu, המניח להמו ביום שבת חדשו. כי בם רצה להניח בהם, לפניו נעבוד ביראה ובפחד, ונודה לשמו בכל יום. תמיד מעין הברכות אל ההודעות אדון השלום, מקדש השבת ומברך שביעי, ומדיח בי קדושה לעמד ושני עודני. זכר למעשה בראשית. זכר למעשה בראשית.
With his word, he was a shield to our fathers. By his decree, he will give life to the dead. The holy God, with whom no other can compare, who provides his people rest each holy Sabbath day. In reverence and awe, we will serve him daily, and every day we will thank him suitably. He is the God to whom all thanks are due, the Lord of peace, who makes the Sabbath special. He blesses the seventh day for his people, to give them joy and remind them of creation. And as we kindle the candles tonight, we are once again reminded not only of the lessons that we responded with here, but also that this being Shabbat is the sign, the guarantee that God has committed himself to us permanently.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvato v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart by your commandments and commanded us to light the candles for the Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvato v'tzivanu lahiyot or lagoyim, v'natan lanu Yeshua Mashiachenu ha'or la'olam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to be a light for the nations, and gave us Yeshua, our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Our Tehillah Habrichat Shah portion on the bottom of pages 136 and 137 reminds us of the reality that God has acted on our behalf in fulfillment of in answer to our prayers down through the centuries and in fulfillment of his promises to us. He has come and has redeemed or liberated or rescued his people. That becomes our response after I lead you through that opening line or two in Hebrew. Baruch Adonai Elohei Yisrael, ki pakad et amo, vayishlach lo padut, vayarem lanu keren Yeshua b'veit David avdo. Together.
Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come and has redeemed his people. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago. Salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all our days.
Having done so, the one described as Keren Yeshua, the horn of salvation, sits enthroned as a further guarantee of God's promise to comfort and to assure.
Elohim asher diber mikadem pe'amim rabot uvidrachim rabot el ha'avot be'ar ha'nevi'im diber aleinu be'acharit hayamim ha'ele be'yad ha'ben asher Sam le'yoresh kol u'viado gam asa et ha'olamim u'zohar kevodo v'tzelem atzmuto v'noseh kol bidvaro rav ha'gavura Ulakashe hasa tihur chataim yashav le'emin agadula. In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, the
established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever. Given the nature of this particular Shabbat, as we've already talked about it in view of what happened last Shabbat, around the Jewish world, there's a reflection going on, and it's then appropriate to add a part of our traditional liturgy to our traditional liturgy that relates directly to these events. In the traditional liturgy, often during Shabbat prayers, we acknowledge those whose contributions allow the Jewish community to thrive. And so an adaptation of that has been suggested as we remember those who were slaughtered last Shabbat. And the adaptation is this: Mishabeach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak v'Yaakov, Sarah Rivka, Leah v'Rachel, Hu Yavarech et kol HaKahal HaKodesh, Hazain kol Kahalot HaKodesh. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, may he bless everyone in this holy congregation, together with all holy congregations. And may he bless those who unite to pray in synagogues, and those who come there to pray, and all those who faithfully engage with the needs of the community. And so we acknowledge the contributions in this way of those who allowed the Jewish community to thrive, even though it cost them their lives. We say, Yehi Zechrem Baruch. May their memories be a blessing. And in their memory and in solidarity with that Jewish communities around the world understand that these are people who are part of our family. And as we do when we remember lost family members, we stand as we respond with Kaddish. Because at times like this, we need to remember, even at times like this, God is the one who reaches out to his people. And in this particular form of Kaddish, coming from the Sephardi community, pages 156 and 157, we ask that he will cause his salvation to sprout, as we all anticipate the time of him bringing near his Messiah, when we will be reunited with those who have left the scene before us. Pages 156 and 157. Yikadal v'yikadash shamer abad ve'alma divrach yirute v'yamlich malchute v'yatzmach turkede v'karev meshecheh v'chayei chonu yom echonu v'chayei l'chol beit Yisrael v'adala u'izman kariva imru omen Yehei shmer abad mevorach le'olam lo me'omaya Borach, Leolam Ol Me'omaya Yitbarach, Yishtabach V'Par V'Tromam V'Naseh, V'Adar V'Aleh V'Yidhalal, Shnei D'Kudashah Berichu, V'Eila Min Kol Berchata, V'Shirata, Tushbechata, V'Nechamata, Da'amiran Be'alma V'Imru Amen. Yesh lama rabba mishamaya v'chayim tovim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Osei shalom imrama u'yasei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world which is created according to his will. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom and cause his salvation to sprout and bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and in your days, and in the life of all the house of Israel, speedily, yes, soon, and say,
Amen.
May his great name be blessed forever and forever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded be the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world, and say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven, and good life for us, and for all Israel, and say,
Amen.
He who makes peace in the heavenly realms, may he make peace for us and for all Israel, and say,
Amen.
You may be seated. Yes, may there be great peace for us all from heaven, and for those, particularly those who are in mourning. As we wait the times we prayed for in Sephardi Kaddish, we are reminded on pages 42 and 43, top 3 paragraphs, Emet Elohei Olam, that in the meantime, God remains for us, our shield and our rock, as he was for our ancestors, so also for us and throughout our generations. We do this responsively. It begins, Emet Elohei Olam Malkeinu, Sur Yaakov Magen Yeshenu, and you respond.
It is true, the God of the world is our King. The rock of Jacob is the shield of our salvation. From generation to generation he endures, and his name endures. And his throne is established, and his kingdom and his faithfulness forever endure.
And his word lives and endures. It is faithful and desirable forever. It is from everlasting to everlasting. It is for our ancestors and for us, for our children, and in fact, for our generations and all generations of the seed of Israel, his servants.
The help of our fathers are you from ages past, a shield and a savior to their children after them in all generations and generations. In the heights of the world is your dwelling, and your judgments and your righteousness extend to the ends of the earth.
If we take in these words that we've responded with and make them our very own, then we will truly then affirm the words that we're about to respond with. Ein kamoka, truly, there is none like you, O Lord among the gods. Pages 88 and 89 is that response.
Ein kamoka Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kamaseka. Malchut kamalchut kol olamim, umemshalcha b'kol dor, b'kol dor v'ador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imdor le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Together. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
His is a kingdom that endures for all eternity. We are part of that kingdom, therefore he is our king, which is what we now acknowledge as we rise, facing Jerusalem, the direction of the ark, and we respond with the Shema, pages 34 and 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Asher Elohim etzavcha hayom alevecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'divartam, v'shivtecha bebetecha, uv'lechtecha b'derech, uv'shakbecha uv'omercha, uv'shaktam levot al yadecha, ve'hayu letodachot be'eitecha, uv'tavtam al mezozot be'eitecha, uv'yisharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone.
Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
We turn now to pages 76 to 81 for the immediate portions for this evening, paragraphs 6 and 7. It's once again a reminder that our God continues to watch over us as his people, and in fact, we are always in his keeping, daily, evening, morning, and noon. Make these your words as you quietly respond on these pages, and then we'll join together on the top of page 81. So grant peace, goodness, blessing, grace, kindness, and mercy upon us and upon all Israel, your people, especially at this time. Bless all of us. Bless us, our Father, all of us as one with the light of your face. For it is in the light of your face you gave to us the Torah of life and love and kindness. Ma'ukata Adonai, et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Blessed are you, O Lord, who blesses your people with peace. And for this reason now we respond. My God, guard my lips from evil, and my tongue from speaking deceit.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. You who establish peace in the heavens, grant peace to us and to all Israel. May it be your will that Jerusalem be solidly established, O Lord our God, the God of our fathers. May the service of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasing to you. There we will serve you with all, as in days of old.
Anaknu Malpuin Kol Takanunena, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. We offer all our prayers in the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. May the service of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasing to you. May our service be pleasing to you, O Lord our God, which is why we now respond as we anticipate that time. that will be the response around the world, throughout the world. Vayi ben so, pages 88 and 89, reflecting on the time when, in fact, the word of the Lord will go out of Jerusalem and the Torah from Mount Zion.
Vayi ben so Aaron vayomer Moshe Kum Adonai vayafutzoy baka veyanuzu mesanecha mipanecha Ki mitzion teisei Torah Ki mitzion teisei Torah U'devar Adonai Yerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'avo Yisrael B'kedushato. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel.
He gave us a gift, a treasure, in fact, to which we now respond on page 133.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside, the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We hear your words, that we may learn them, love them, live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
All the Lord has said, we will do.
Mi shebarach avotenu, Abraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Jenny. May he bless Matthew. May he bless Rabbi John. May he bless Connie. And may he bless Gabby, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families, and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch et Adonai hamavorach, Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bakar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Vayehu Chayei Sarah Mea Shana V'esrim Shana V'sheva Shanim Shnei Chayei Sarah Batamot Sarah V'kiryat Arba Hebron be'eretz Kinan, vayavo Avraham, lispod l'Sarah b'livakota, vayachom Avraham, me'al penei meito, vayedaber el b'nei chet lemor. You may be seated. And Sarah lived 127 years, and these were the years of Sarah's life. And Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep. And Abraham got up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Het. Now, this is, of course, when he purchases the plot in which to bury, or the cave in which to bury Sarah. But the whole scene really doesn't have a lot of emotion to it. She lived this long, she died, he wept, then he got up and went and conducted business. And I think it's a mistake to focus on the idea that that was because, you know, burial practices and the heat and all of this and needing to get her buried quickly. I think what it's teaching us is how to mourn appropriately. And that's not to say that you shouldn't have emotion by any stretch. What I'm talking about is that Abraham's grief did not stop him from continuing with God's plan for him. He didn't let his grief become his identity. And I think sometimes it's very easy for people to just be so enmeshed in whatever tragedy has befallen them that seems to become who they are, that tragedy. And Abraham didn't do this. He got up and he did what needed to be taken care of, and then in the next chapter or so, he's finding Isaac a wife and he's following on with God's plan for him. And so I think when we're talking to people who have experienced something emotionally traumatic, you know, we don't want to say, oh, just move on with your life. And people will say that because I think that's very insensitive. But we can encourage them to have hope, that there is a source of hope that will get them through it. And that source of hope has a plan for them that they can move towards. We're told that Abraham believed and it was accounted to him as righteousness. Well, what did he believe in? We're also told that in a different area that in terms of mourning the dead, we shouldn't mourn like people that have no hope. So Abraham, to me, Abraham believed that there was something beyond the grave for Sarah. And he believed that there was something beyond Sarah's death for him to accomplish, and that was to continue with God's plan in terms of getting Isaac settled and moving into the land, living where God wanted him to live.
So, at any rate, there's a whole lot of stuff in this parsha that could be talked about. But that's one thing that stuck out to me, because I think that people in our society today have experienced a lot of trauma in a lot of different ways, from a lot of different angles. And it's real important that we allow them their grief, we allow people to mourn, and have to treat that as legitimate. But yet we also encourage them to have hope in the future. So thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Continuing the story, Genesis 25, 7 through 11. This is how long Abraham lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last, dying at a ripe old age, an age full of years, and he was gathered to his people. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, by Mamre. The field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Het, Abraham was buried there with his wife Sarah. After Abraham died, God blessed Isaac, his son, and Isaac lived near Beer-Lakai Rome.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan לנו תורת אמת וחיי העולם נתן לתוכנו. Baruch atah Adonai נותן התורה. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
We just read about the end of Abraham's life. Abraham's life as we know it began when he heard the word of God a couple weeks ago in the portions. So we are now ready to acknowledge that we too have heard the word of God, just like our ancestors did, and as they stood before God at Mount Sinai to acknowledge his word, so we now stand, as it were, in their sandals and acknowledge we too have received those words. The Zod HaTorah is that response. It's pages 98 and 99. If you need a transliteration, that's page 95.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated.
Genesis 17, 15 through 21. God said to Abraham, "As for Sarah, your wife, you are not to call her Sarai, mockery. Her name is to be Sarah, princess. I will bless her. Moreover, I will give you a son by her. Truly, I will bless her. She will be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her." At this, Abraham fell on his face and laughed. He thought to himself, "Will a child be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah give birth at 90? Abraham said to God, "If only Ishmael could live in your presence." God answered, "No, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you are to call him Isaac, or laughter. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. But as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful and give him many descendants. He will father 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year.
You think maybe those words impacted and changed Abraham's and Sarah's lives? So God's words need to do the same for us. That's why we call it Etz Chaim, the tree of life, waiting to take root in our lives, waiting to renew our days as of old. That becomes our response on pages 96 and 97. Etz Chaim.
Etz Chaim hi lamar chazikim ba betom kei ha-merushar terachei ha-darchei noam v'kol zivotei ha-shalom Ashivenu Adonai Elecha Bein Shuba Kadesh Amenu Kadesh Amenu Ketem Ashivenu Adonai Elecha Bein Shuba Kadesh Amenu Kadesh Amenu Tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days
as of old.
And now, we have the opportunity, with our days renewed as of old, to stand before God as the priests of old did, so we become his priests now. And we respond on pages 98 and 99 with Uvnu Ko Yomar as we express our gratitude as well as our commitment.
Uvnu Ko Yomar, Shua, Adonai Ribavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. Ba'avur David Adecha al Teshev Tenei Shekach. Ki lekach tov nafti lachem. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
Shabbat school is excused. And thank you, Betty, for subtly reminding me that I should have had everybody do what you guys just did, which was to greet one another while you're standing with the Shabbat Shalom. Good to have you here. And if I say it enough times after the event, one of these days I'll remember to say it before the event. And I was also told probably not a good idea to shake hands because we all know that's the best way to communicate to somebody else the stuff that you're carrying. Okay, enough said. If you look in the bulletin, the Drash title may sound a lot like an old classic Thanksgiving hymn. And that's okay, because guess what? We're less than 3 weeks away from Thanksgiving. And you see, faith may quite rightly be associated with our ancestors, and especially, though by no means exclusively, with Abraham. Because we've got Sarah, as we heard tonight. And later on comes Isaac and Rebekah and Rachel and Leah and Jacob and Joseph as the story continues to unfold through these texts that we'll be reading. You see, our forefathers and our foremothers, and by the way, that's spelled differently, our forefathers, F-O-R-E, and our foremothers, F-O-U-R, had tremendous faith. Sarah, Rebekah, and Rachel all had tremendous difficulty having any children at all. But God answered their prayer. And they each had miracle sons, Isaac and Jacob and Joseph. You know, actually that sounds almost like another story we recall at this season. They each share a theme in common, miracles and the supernatural birth of the Son. But that's a different story. But it's all part of the wonderful ongoing story about the God of miracles and people of faith, their faithfulness. But tonight's story begins, and as you heard, also ends with Abraham and with Sarah. Now let me review part of that story with you, because it seems that Abraham suddenly appears on the scene in Scripture. However, our ancient sages in the Midrash provide some of the backstory. It's an interesting backstory. In the Midrash, we're told, Rabbi Hia said, Terah, Abraham's father, was a maker and merchant of idols. One time he went out, and so he appointed Abraham merchant in his place. Someone would come in wanting to buy an idol, and Abraham would say to the man, "How old are you?" He would say to Abraham, 50, or some might say 60. And Abraham would say to him, "Woe to that man who is 50 and wants to bow to an idol just one day old." The man would be embarrassed and walk away. One time a woman came carrying a dish of fine flour in her hand. She said to him, "Take this and offer it before them," to them being the idols. So Abraham stood up, carrying a club in his hand, and he broke all of the idols. He then placed the club in the hand of the largest of them. When his father returned, he said to Abraham, "Why did you do all this to them?" Abraham said to him, "A woman came in carrying a dish of fine flour and said to me, 'Take this and offer it before them.' So I brought it before them. This idol said, 'I will eat first,' and that idol said, 'I will eat first.' And then the largest of them stood up, and he took a club and broke them all." Terah said to Abraham, "Why are you fooling with me? Do they know anything?" Abraham said to him, "May your ears not hear what your mouth is saying." Great story. Whether it's accurate or not, it's still a great story. It helps provide some of the background for why God said to Abraham, "Lech lecha." Now it's time to get going. It's time to move out. And we've looked at that passage before, but let me briefly summarize that for you, because that's how the story unfolds and gets us to where we are now. Their story, Abraham and Sarah's story, opens with God's command to Abraham and Sarah to make what we would call in modern terms aliyah, to get going. And then God continues in that classic text, "I will make you a great nation, I will bless you, I'll make your name great, you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you I will curse. All the families of the earth shall be blessed through you." Here God is promising Abraham two very important things, among others. One is a national family, but he's also providing Abraham with a universal mandate. Back in the 18th century, a famous rabbi, the Vilna Gaon, suggests that the phrase usually translated, "I shall curse," which is in Hebrew, or, he suggests that it means, "I will show them light." Therefore, Israel is to be a light unto the nations, a kingdom of priests, teachers who bring the message of God to the world. And we know that because God told us that in Exodus 19. He reminded us of that in Isaiah chapter 42. And it fits with this mandate. Now, Abraham desperately requires a son for both of these mandates or missions. And so the barren couple, Abraham and Sarah, first placed their hope, it appears, their hope for the future on Lot, Abraham's nephew. And the Bible records in the very next verse, following the blessing and the charge that I've just quoted to you, and Abraham went in accordance with the way the Lord spoke to him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham took Sarah his wife and Lot the son of his brother and all the wealth they had acquired. But it appears that Abraham's mission wasn't materialistic enough for Lot. He has no desire to perfect the world. He wants to possess it instead. So he leaves Abraham's land and Abraham's Lord in favor of the lush city of Sodom to pursue matter rather than mission, monetary values rather than a monumental vision. On the other hand, the great message of Abraham's new name is his acceptance of that universal mission. So as the story continues, and Abraham called out there the name of the Lord. Interesting phrasing. It's a phrasing that is picked up elsewhere, because a very important aspect of this story is frequently pointed out by the rabbis, and I suggested this to you, I believe even last week. And it's illustrated in the passage from last week. Yeah. Abraham demonstrates the great significance of hospitality, reaching out to people, which we call kiruv. And concerning Abraham's hospitality and reaching out to people, or kiruv, we read in the Talmud, and he called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God of the world, or the world rather. And in phrasing similar to what I just read to you from Genesis 13. Text goes on to say, Reish Lakish said, read not and he called, but instead read, he caused to call. Meaning that our father Abraham caused the name of the Holy One to be called by the mouth of every passerby. Now, how did this come about? After travelers, whom he made his guests, had eaten and drunk, they stood up to bless him. He said to them, was it of mine that you ate? You ate of that which belongs to the everlasting God of the world. So thank, praise, and bless the one who spoke and the world came into being. End quote. It's a reflection on the text from last week. A benefit of hospitality in Kiruv is that it brings blessing to those who practice it, but also to those who receive it. And that's especially important, I think, in our day and age. Then back in Genesis 15, we read of God's promise of an heir who will make Abraham's descendants light the world like the stars of heaven, which is why he tells them to count the stars of heaven. Quick aside, I just found out this week, and I think it came from something that Dr. Patrice sent me, that at that time, in those days, if you went outside to count the stars, you could probably count some 4,000 of them that would be visible at night. Now, I don't know if Abraham got up to 4,000 or not, but, just to give you some background. Anyhow, back to our story. Abraham's descendants would light up the world like the stars of heaven. Now, the structure and content of this Torah portion, the beginning one, teach us why Lot cannot be considered a suitable heir for Abraham's mission. And so we must wait, interestingly enough, for many generations, in a sense, for Lot's return to the fold, in the person of his descendant Ruth, the offspring of Moab, the son born to Lot and his daughter. You remember Ruth, the great-grandma, or was she the great-great-grandma? I didn't recall that out of David. Apparently God, and this is important for our story here, has cosmic patience, and often so must we, if we are to be his emissaries and light up the world as his descendants. And Abraham and Sarah show us then how their faith and their faithfulness should enlighten us. You see, in the passage that was read to you this evening, also from last week, while God does not address Sarah directly in Genesis 17, God refers to her and changes Sarah's name just like Abraham's, with a parallel explanation when he says, "She shall give rise to nations, rulers of people shall issue from her." And when Abraham doubts Sarah's ability to bear children and suggests that God's covenant continue through Ishmael, God assures him that the covenant will in fact pass through Sarah's son, Isaac. So God makes it clear that not all of Abraham's descendants are part of this covenant, only the ones of Sarah. This underscores Sarah's crucial role. It makes Sarah and Abraham equal partners then in the covenant. In a sense then, the greatest sign of this covenant is the fulfillment of God's amazing promise that Sarah will bear a child. And so we read the reflection found in the book of Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 11. By faith, even Sarah, who was past age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. So let's summarize several lessons from Abraham's and Sarah's lives, particularly as reflected for us in Hebrews chapter 11. And to summarize the story there, faith involves, right from the outset, what we might call responsiveness or faithfulness. Despite other inducements and influences, for example, the prosperity and position Abraham had in her, or the comfort and convenience later on in Egypt, they turned their backs on it. And they did so despite uncertainty. And the text in Hebrews says, not knowing where they were going. In other words, they did not lay down any preconditions, somewhat in contrast to our own, perhaps modern motto, be sure you know what you're getting into. And you know, usually that's a really good motto to have. But that's not what drove Abraham and Sarah. You know, there was this guy on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. We saw a seafood restaurant and a sign on the specials board which read, "Big lobster tails, $5 each." Amazed at this great value, he said to the waitress, "$5 each for lobster tails? Is that correct?" "Yes," she said, "it's our special, just for today." "Well," he said, "they must be little lobster tails." "No," she replied, "they're really big." "Are you sure they aren't green lobster tails and a little bit tough?" "No," she said, "they are really big red lobster tails." "Big red lobster tails, $5 each," he said again, even more amazed. "They must be old lobster tails." "No, they're definitely today's," she says. "Today's big red lobster tails for $5 each," he repeated, astounded. "Yes," she insisted. "Well, here's my $5, he said. "I'll take one." So she took the money, led him to a table where she invited him to sit down, and then she sat down next to him, put her hand on his shoulder, leaned close to him, and said very dramatically, "Once upon a time, there was a really big red lobster." Well, yes, there are times that you should know what you're getting into. On the other hand, Abraham and Sarah's faith enabled them to follow God and energize their faithfulness despite the uncertainty, and it made it possible for them to face uncertainty. Because you see, faith also tolerates God's paradoxes. Hebrews reflects on it this way. It was the land of promise, and yet it was a foreign land. Very similar to our phrase found in our text. Abraham was ger v'toshav. He was a stranger and yet a resident. Key phrase. So Abraham and Sarah were promised the land, and yet they waited, and they watched, and they waited, and they watched. They were patient. They didn't throw their faith overboard because it didn't happen when they wanted, in other words, on their schedules. They allowed God to work his plan in his way, in his time. They kept going despite obstacles. Because faith rests in God's promises. And so the text says they considered him faithful, the one who made the promises. They rested in what God told them, in this case a child. And they waited, Over 25 years they waited, trusting God, resting in God's faithfulness, despite the impossibility of the situation. The rabbi of old put it together this way. Romans chapter 4. Against all hope, nevertheless Abraham in hope believed. Without weakening in his faith, he faced the fact that his body was as good as dead since he was about 100 years old, and that Sarah's womb was also dead. Yet he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, even though it was impossible. But he was strengthened in his faith, and he trusted God, being fully persuaded that what God promised, that he would perform. Faith rests in God's promises. It certainly did for them. Faith also means, and this is important, especially in our day and age, trusting God in and through his tests. Remember, Isaac was the promise fulfilled. We read about this last week. And now God asks that he be sacrificed. So after all that waiting, the promise is about to be extinguished. This part of the story reminds us that tests are for our greatest benefit, for our specially designed good. They are part of God's purpose. Because as James and Peter say in their letters, these things develop perseverance, enhance our completeness and our maturity. It's as if we're being refined, become, or to come across as more genuine. This part of the story also reminds us that we must trust God even if we can't trace him. We must trust God even if we can't trace him. So to summarize these lessons from responsiveness to God in Abraham and Sarah's life. We need to tolerate God's paradoxes. We need to rest in God's promises. We need to trust God in and through his tests. What this is talking about is an active faith. It's a reflexive faith. Reflexive. You know the story. You're sitting in the doctor's office, and he comes along with that little hammer, and taps the knee. An instant response or reflex. That's supposed to happen. Well, in one sense, that's part of faith and how we should be responding. So faith is active. Faith is reflexive in that sense. It's an immediate response to God, despite anything that might disrupt, or disrupt. Disrupt. I got it, didn't I? Okay, then we can continue. And their active, reflexive, faithful responsiveness to God helps explain the fullness of their lives, which our text for tonight indicates. You wondered when I get to the text for tonight? We did it, but we had to get the background. It begins, chapter 23:1. These were the years of Sarah's life. And so the great rabbi of the Middle Ages, Rashi, extrapolates to say that all of Sarah's years were equally good. And then a little later in the text, Genesis 24:1 then adds, Abraham was now old, advanced in days. The rabbis at this point ask the question, why does the Torah add at this point, advanced in days? And the answer they give is this, that Abraham was able to recount what he did each day of his life. And then as part of the concluding reading that you heard, Genesis 25:7 tells us, these are the days of the years of Abraham's life. And our traditions tell us that while most people's lives can be measured in years, Abraham's life could be measured in days. However, understanding the story well, the traditions understand, as we should understand, that like Sarah, Abraham certainly did not have it easy. So why does the tradition then say that all of Sarah's years were equally good and that Abraham lived every day to the fullest? Aren't they taking into account the days and years in harsh living conditions? Well, the idea is that a full, well-lived life is not a life of perfection or comfort, but it is a life of following God and his ways. Abraham and Sarah lived full and meaningful lives because they said yes to God at every turn. No minute was wasted because they were seeking to do the right thing. Now let me No minute was wasted in their lives because they were, in fact, seeking to do the right thing and to be on the path that God had for them. And even if they messed it up or it was challenging, they continued. The question at this point, of course, arises for us. Are we people such as Abraham and Sarah? The well-known Reformed rabbi and scholar Arnold Jacob Wolf puts it this way, quote, "How you know God's will for you and whether you are able to do God's will are difficult questions, but they are secondary to the belief that when you know, however you know God's will, there is no real choice about performing it. There's only obedience or sin," end quote. Or I would phrase it, faithfulness or failure. If we have Abraham's and Sarah's kind of faith, then we will in fact respond. And if we don't respond to God as a habit of life, let's not deceive ourselves. We don't then have the faith of our forefathers and foremothers. We don't have the faith of Abraham or Sarah or Isaac or Rebekah or later Jacob and Rachel and Leah and even Joseph and Moses. Our task is to follow in the footsteps of the faithfulness of our fathers and our mothers. And it is our choice. Take the next minute or so to reflect on that in quiet. Abraham and Sarah and their descendants, that's us, were given a universal mandate. That mandate continues. Elena reminds us on pages 102 to 107 that calling, our calling, is our task, as we anticipate the time when that universal mandate is in fact realized universally and the world is perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. We stand, we face Jerusalem yet again, and we respond along those pages.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'atekiru la'yotzer bereshit, shelo asanu k'goy ha'brasot, velo samanu k'mishmekot ha'adama, shelo sam kelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'kavahonam, ve'anachnu horim, Umishakalim umodim, Lifnei melech malkei hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, She'odotei shamayim v'yosei haaretz, Umoshav yakaro hashamayim mima'al, Ushkinatu zo, V'galavei meromim, Hu Eloheinu, Malkeinu efesulato kakatu katorato vayadata hayom vahashavota el levavecha ki Adonai hu ha'elohim b'shamayim b'ma'ah ve'al ha'aretz mitakat eno.
Master of all,
to exalt the Creator of the world, for he has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs, our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. For he stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. There is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's great Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled. The Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. V'ne'eman v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo
You may be seated. Everyone except for Gary.
You may be standing.
Be upstanding.